So, this is episode 4 of the Tree Peakers podcast. I'm Eddie. So far, I've released 3 podcasts on this subject, and each person has wanted to remain anonymous, which is fine with me. My firefighter that I got 2 stories off of, and I got 1 to go, has a 17-year career that he has had in fighting wildfires and being a hotshot firefighter, and so I totally understand why he didn't want to go on camera, seeing how his retirement, his pension, all this could be, on the line if it got out that he was sharing these kind of stories on this kind of topic. Now, this gentleman, I happen to, just like everybody that I meet here in New Mexico who has these amazing stories, and these, sometimes these stories they've been sitting on for, many, many years, and they don't tell many people about it. The reason people open up to me is once I heard how prevalent some of the Bigfoot or Sasquatch activity is here in our neck of the woods, in the 4 corners of North America. Me being here in New Mexico, close to the Navajo reservation, you wouldn't believe how prominent some of these stories are. And the business that I'm in with bartending and serving tables and being a part of this community for the last better part of almost 4 decades, it wasn't until I would say the last 5 years or so when I really started putting some pieces together of some things. There's an incident that happened to me and my friends, which I'm going to share tonight. And for 20 years, I thought it was a supernatural experience. I thought that what had happened to my faithful dog Star and my girlfriend at the time, and my 2 buddies who went for a hike in the Bisti Bandlands, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had, and the Bisti Bandlands is a national park that you can go and hike here in New Mexico, and it's about 45 miles outside of the town that I live, and it's out. There's nobody out there, it's out in the boonies, but I thought maybe my friends and we had taken the car off of the beaten path that day, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we ran over a graveyard, like how would I say, it's on the Navajo reservation, the Bisti Bandlands or whatever, and I thought we had ran over an ancient burial ground or done something to offend the spirit world, because the night that ensued for us when we got done with our hike, and I'll get into it here shortly, but everything that took place that night was so out of the ordinary, and I knew nothing about this subject at the time. So, and even if I did, it was still so terrifying that in the moment I wouldn't even have known. We could have never known what was going on. But after discovering the facts by How to Hunt, Steve, world-renowned hunting guide, after coming across his page. And I used to just watch his page on YouTube for the hunting adventures he would go on, because growing up here in New Mexico, my dad would take me elk hunting and deer hunting and all this kind of stuff. And I grew up on my grandparents had a ranch out in a place, probably I would say about 120 miles outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. They had a ranch in a little tiny village of a town. And I grew up out there running around, and even when I look back, like when my cousin and I were out there hunting with little 22s or pellet guns, BB guns, whatever, there was a day when, if I think back, there were no bears out there, and we found this footprint one time, and it was just one footprint, and the leaf and stuff was the tree was shaking, and we heard this thing run off. And my cousin swore up and down that it was a bear. And I remember saying, there are no bears up here, where we're at in our particular little area. And there was just, the footprint was weird. And it was only one. You would think if it was if it was but it was fresh in that sand or whatever, and it was decent size. If I think back, if it wasn't a bear and if it was something of this manner, it would have been a juvenile. It would have been something. It wasn't, like an 18 or 20 inch footprint, but it was definitely big. But there were no claws or claw marks or anything, but it was definitely a foot impression, and whatever it was, we spooked and it had taken off running. To circle this all back around and kind of give you the origins of what really got me thinking that what had happened in the Bisti Bandlands in 2002 or 3, one of those years, that it could have been, or I'm pretty darn certain these days that it was a Bigfoot encounter, is the more and more that I would learn about the Navajo Nation and some of the experiences that I was being shared with after I had something, and this is kind of where it all started. So I was following Steve on the Facts by How to Hunt. I was listening to his stories, and my wife and I were watching together like we always do, my wife Megan and I, and we came across his story that he was telling, like he does by reading and sharing his emails of all these encounters that people send him from around the world. And Megan turns and looks at me and says, oh my God, Eddie, that sounds just like what happened to you in the Bisti Badlands. There were so many similarities to my story. I mean, I've shared it with friends. I've shared it. I shared it on my cousin Gabe's podcast. Even he had told me that he thought it was a Sasquatch encounter, but at the time I really wasn't into the subject. This was like 2019, 2020. But around the same time, I was bartending here in town at one of the local breweries, and I had 3 gentlemen sitting at my bar. It was like later on a Friday or Saturday night. It was one of those, and it was late. They came in late. They were the only people at my bar, and they had some jackets on from one of the big colleges here in the state. And there's only 2, so let's just say it was out of Albuquerque. If you're familiar with the state, then you put 2 and 2 together there. But anywho, I seen their jackets, and just like any patron or guest that I'm taking care of, and I start talking with them, I said, I seen the letters on their jacket, and I say to them, what brings you guys to town? What are you doing here? And they look at each other, and then they say, well, you wouldn't believe us if we told you. They were the students, and they said they were here with one of their professors. And I said, well, you should try me. I'm into some pretty weird shit. At the time, I've always been into the UFO topic long before they called them UAPs. I've always been into, because there's a lot of high strangeness here in New Mexico. I mean, I've filmed various things in the sky that are extremely abnormal and strange. I've seen things. All you have to do is look up, watch the sky, and you'd be surprised what you see. Many things aren't just your ordinary jet aircraft. Now, I'm not saying everything I've ever seen is an alien ship or anything like that. It could be black budget military program. It could be something from another place. It could be something we've reverse engineered, something. I have no clue. I don't have all the answers, but I'm into it, and I let them know that I was. And I said, you should try me, and I'm into some weird stuff, So they begin to tell me, and this will wrap around and you'll understand what really got me thinking about what happened to me 20 years ago, because it all falls into place. Okay, so these students who say they're here with their professor, and they've been given a grant by the Navajo Nation to study the Bigfoot family that is known to be frequenting, or how would you say this? They told me that there had been so many reports out towards this certain casino that had been built on the outskirts of town, going out of town, along the San Juan River, and they told me that they were here studying the Bigfoot family that was known to be active in this little area, and they talked about the big male, the female, and the juvenile. And then they proceeded to show me a couple of pictures that they had on their cell phones of, and they told me how they had these cameras set up, and they were taking infrared photos at night of them crossing the road to get down to the river. And I was shown a couple photos that that were pretty interesting, to say the least. That, you know, made me look down at the phone and what I was being shown, and look at them, and then look back down at the phone. And it was just knowing that where this was by the new casino was literally right along the San Juan River and right next to the road, less than, 5-10 miles away from the road that you have to take to go up onto the plateau and head to the Bisti Badlands. Okay, so after Megan mentioned it to me, after we had heard it on Steve's podcast on the Facts by How to Hunt, and then I'm fucking talking to these gentlemen, and they show me this, and I come back and I talk to Megan about it, and I say, you're not gonna believe this story I was told, and these pictures I was shown, and so that really ramped up my curiosity into this subject. And I would start looking for it more as I was talking to people. As a matter of fact, there's things popping in my head now. So when I was serving a table after that, and I was sharing this story with one of my regulars, First Nations, Navajo gentleman, Native American gentleman, who lives out that way towards the Navajo reservation, he ended up sharing a picture of a footprint that was on his property when they would go hiking. And it was in the sand. You wouldn't believe this footprint was beautiful. I mean, it was just, but it was huge. And, and he went on to tell me all these stories about what was going on his property. And there was just something so primal and fascinating about it to me that the more that I dug in and the more that I learned, the more I was hooked, And especially, more than anything, the more that it made me go back and revisit what took place in the Bisti Badlands 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago now. And it's a story I want to tell you now. I'm on camera because I have nothing to hide. Most of these podcasts, I'm assuming, if people do not want to be on camera with me, you will just see the Tree Peakers logo and the image, and the audio will be all you will hear. But I find something really fascinating. I mean, podcasts are some of the biggest thing in the world. There's something about human beings sharing stories and telling stories of anything and everything that has happened in someone's lifetime, or just stories. Stories is all we have. It's all we used to have, and it's how you pass down things from generation to generation. And here's a story that I gotta tell. This is I never knew that 20 something years ago I would have a podcast that the origins of really date back to this story on a summer day in New Mexico in late 2002, 2003, one of those years. I'm not exactly sure which one, but here it goes, okay? So for anyone that does check this podcast out or who finds it in the future, I have plenty of stories to come. I've got people lined up and interviews with some amazing people from my area, and I hope to be attending Bigfoot conferences and things like that. It'll be in my neck of the woods or not too far, so I can make more connections. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I can end up talking to people like Dave Polides of the Missing 411. I was supposed to have an interview with the cat from Sasquatch Chronicles last summer, but work got in the way and I missed the phone call, and I regret it to this day. Hopefully I'll be able to reach out to him again and be able to tell this very story on Sasquatch Chronicles. But if not, this is why I created Tree Peakers. And it's because I don't want any more missed opportunities on this subject. It's too fascinating. It's too amazing. And for those of you who will be following this or are interested in listening, I want to give a shout out to my sister Raquel in Sacramento. I love you so much. I miss all of you up there. That's where that's where I was born, and I was raised in New Mexico, here with my grandparents, who I call mom and dad. But my birth parents and my brothers and sisters are all out in California. So to Angel and Raquel, here is my story. I hope you look forward to the others. You were asking where the new episode was, so this one's for you. Since I can't talk to who I'm going to here soon, I want to go ahead and get something out so you guys can enjoy. So let's travel back in time. Let's go to 2002, 2003. It's the summertime. I'm with my then girlfriend at the time, Brooke, my dog Star, my German Shepherd Star, who I had for over 10 years. She passed away in 2013, and she was still young, vibrant little pup at the time. Maybe I had had her for a year, 6 months to a year, something like that. But even at then, she was a German Shepherd Lab mix, one of the best animals, best friends, best companions I ever had in my lifetime, and I still miss her to this very day. So I'm with Brooke, I'm with Matt, and I'm with Paul, and we travel for the day to go on a hike to the Bisti Badlands. And so when you get to the Bisti, so you're in New Mexico, and you're you got to get on not on the interstate, but on a highway. So you leave town and you go up the plateau and you drive up, right? And you'll know when you're getting close to the national park, that is the Bisti Badlands, because New Mexico is already like just one of a kind landscape, gorgeous. If you've been here, you know what I'm talking about. The Four Corners area is just magical, but it is all sandstone and dusty like sand, and like high desert, just magical landscape, right? But you will know that this is what the Bisti is known for. It is world renowned for people to come and spend a day or spend a weekend and hike and camp. And if you're going to go out there, it's not like Mesa Verde National Park or some of the other stones like my buddy Tyler took my family and I, Megan and the kids. We went, well, Megan was pregnant with Apollo, but Riley was with us. That's my daughter, my son Apollo, and my wife Megan. My best buddy in the whole world, Tyler, took us to Zion National Park, and he also took us to Mesa Verde when they came to visit for Christmas, a Christmas or two ago. But the big thing here is, if you're going to go to the Bisti, the difference between those national parks and this national park is there's not a visiting center. There's not a place for lunch. There's not a place to there's a place to sign in when you pull up and you park, but there's just literally like a notebook sitting there, and you like sign in, I guess maybe just in case you get lost out there or something, and if somebody comes and checks and see, I don't know, but there's a place to sign in, but there's no visitor center, is what I want to make clear. Okay, this you were literally 45 to 60 miles out of town. There's nothing out there. I mean, but you'll know when you're getting close to the Bisti Badlands. Turn off. You make a left, and then you go to the national park off of the main road. So you turn onto a dirt road. But all of a sudden, the yellow sandstone kind of classical New Mexico landscape turns stark red, like you're on the planet Mars. I mean, there's nothing like it. From my understanding, what the Bisti Badlands is the remnants of a tropical rainforest from 60 million to 100 million years ago, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. So you have to park your car once you drive down the little dirt road for, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, maybe less, something in there. You park, there's a little place where you can sign in, and then you just start hiking, right? So we had to get there around 11 a.m., maybe noon, something in that range, right? Because we were out there all day. But you have to go for a hike. It's like, what you want to see, like the little mushroom land and all the petrified forest kind of stuff, is all a good 30 minutes to an hour as you start walking. And then it's really a fun, like, amazing hike for the day. I've had friends that have camped out there for the night, and been out there for solstices, winter and summer solstices, to watch the sunrise, sunset, things like that. Well, I've been out there on several occasions, okay? And this is the only time that this actually happened and took place, was out of the 20-something years that I've been going there. I never had an encounter that happened like this. So the whole day was a normal hike, a normal this, a normal that. We came back to the car after a little while, I know, and we got in and we drove off. And this is where I thought maybe, because you're only supposed to go, like, you're supposed to park and you're not supposed to go off of the beaten path like we did, right? And that's where I thought maybe when we did that, I ran over like an ancient burial ground, and that's when things got like really weird as the night set and everything. But so it was a normal hike for the day, this, that, the other, until a windstorm kind of sprung up on us out of nowhere, and we started getting pelted with sand rocks. I mean, the New Mexico weather can change on a dime for you. You know, it could be nice and sunny one minute. Next thing you know, you're like in a torrential thunder rainstorm or something. Now, it didn't get that bad, but the winds did pick up, and we were getting pelted with little sand pebbles and stone, little tiny stones so bad. We were on top of this little hill or whatever, and we were getting pelted so bad that we all decided that we were going to get ready and go. But before that happened, the winds were so powerful. My buddy Matt, our friend Matt, he like rolled down the hill and ended up hurting his ankle. Okay. We didn't realize the extensiveness of how bad the injury was, but at the time we knew it was bad enough to where Paul and I had to put one arm around each of us, and we had to carry him back to the car. Now, at this time, it's probably, I don't even know, we've been out there all day. It's probably anywhere between 6 and 7 p.m. So we've probably got an hour and a half until sunset, okay? We get to the car, and we're all loading in, and we're getting ready, and Star's with us. You know, we've all been on this hike for the day, but it's time to go. The winds have picked up. It's gotten nasty. And my dad at the time, I was like 16, 17 years old. He had got me this little used car. We called the Nugmobile because we like to smoke some weed in there and, you know, just being kids and whatnot. And so it was called the Nugmobile. It was a nice little vehicle. They've never had an issue with it, never had a problem with this car. But all of a sudden we get to the car, we all load in and we're ready to go. And I turn the key and the car won't turn over. So, you know, click, you know, the car won't start. So we're now understanding that, okay, we're stuck right now. We gotta wait a little bit or whatever. And that was the first thing that was just kind of weird, because there should have been no problems with the car or anything. But I would say we waited, 30 minutes to an hour. Maybe we got out of the car, we smoked a little weed, we were hanging out. We were all around anywhere between 16 to 21 years old, in between that little area between all of us, right? Every one of us was kind of a different little age, but around the same. But we eventually got the car to turn over, and here's the next thing that was pretty strange. We get the car to turn over, and I put it in reverse, and I go to back up, and we spin the back tires, spin into the sand, and we're now stuck. Now, I know this sounds funny, I know this sounds weird, but that's what happened. Now we're stuck, and now we're looking, we've been there, so it's probably 7:30, getting closer to 8, so now we're looking at the sun setting, and we're looking at being stuck out in the Bisti Bandlands, which are about, like I said, anywhere from 45 to 60 miles from town. We're now going to be stuck out here for the night, okay? At least until we can figure out how to get the car, some traction and push this thing out. So, this is where the night begins to set in, and for the first little bit, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're sitting in the car. We know night's setting in, so we're like, okay, well, let's start a fire. This is what we tell each other. Let's start a fire. At the time, I'm in high school, so I've got a notebook. I've got my backpack in the car, notebook full of paper. We've got lighters because we were out there smoking a little weed, so should be easy to start a fire, right? So we get the paper. We're kind of like getting kindling from the sagebrush that's around and whatnot, and we try to start a fire. But I tell you right now, no matter what we did, no matter what we tried to do to get that fire to start, it would not start. I mean, we had paper, and we're lighting notebook paper and putting it to the kindling, and it was like every time that happened, it was like the wind would come and just, it would blow it. That's why it was so strange. never had a problem, lighting a fire with those kind of circumstances. Like, it should have lit, it should have stayed lit, but that was where, just one of the first things that was kind of odd, and we really didn't understand why we couldn't get this fire started. But as we continued to go, we're trying to figure out next, how are we going to dig this car out? How are we going to get the wheels some traction and figure all that out? Well, it's flat getting to the point where it's just nighttime now. And we were hoping we had that fire so we could have some light and we could see and stay warm, this, that, the other. Because if you know anything about the New Mexico desert, it could be hotter than a dog during the day and then super cold at night, So, Matt, who's on a hurt ankle, we tell him to stay in the car. And Paul and I decide we get the tire iron out of the trunk, and I think we use the notebook or something else to try and start digging out the tires. And Paul or Matt or somebody had came up with the idea to stick the rubber mats that your feet go on that we had in the back seat. We were going to try and get some traction and put those under the tire. Well, this is where the story turns a little strange, and we had a pretty interesting and terrifying experience from there on in. So Paul and I are outside of the car. You've got Brooke sitting in the front seat of the driver's seat, and you've got my dog Star, who all day long, mind you, was running around, chasing rabbits, having a blast, having fun, this, that, the other. Well, Star is shaking like a leaf on a tree, sitting in shotgun, while Matt's in the back seat with a hurt, what we learned later on to be a sprained ankle. But he's in a lot of pain, so he's not out. It's just Paul and I outside of the car, and we can't get, no matter what we do, we can't get Star to come out of the car, and she's afraid of something. So that was kind of our first little notion that, there was, so you got the fire that wouldn't start, no matter what we did. And the winds weren't that bad. It was like the wind would pick up every time we were trying to light this fire, and it felt like it was getting blown out. Just, it doesn't sound as strange as it was, but trust me, that fire should have started. None of us could understand why we couldn't get that damn fire started with the kindling we had, the notebook paper, the lighters, right? So, Star's shaking like a leaf on a tree. She won't come out. So it's just Paul and I. And as Paul and I are sitting there, and we are digging out the tires from the sand, okay? One of us has the tire iron, the other one has the notebook or whatever it is we had found in the car that we could help use to dig. That's when, you got to remember too, we're in the pitch black darkness, and it's nighttime, okay? There's no city lights. There's no community out there. You're not in a forest, but you are literally out in a desert wilderness, a barren landscape that is anywhere from 45 to 60 miles away from the city, but yet on the entire way there's all these lifts and plateaus and not mountains but hills. You'd have to know the New Mexico landscape to get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. But as we're digging, we start hearing twigs breaking. And when I mean twigs breaking, I'm talking north, south, east, west. You've got the sound of twigs breaking. So, and it's happening all around us. And for the first 10, maybe 15 minutes, Paul and I, neither of us say anything to each other, but we can hear this. And as it started to pick up in its speed, and you could hear things moving around us, whatever it was that was breaking the twigs, you could hear them. I don't know how to say it. Were they walking? Were they running? I don't, like footsteps. You could hear, and the sheer creep factor that was going on. Finally, it was either Paul or I, one of us said, we put the tire iron down. I was like, okay, is anybody else hearing what's going on right now? And that's when Paul or I, who we were talking to each other, got through. Well, I've been hearing this the whole time, but I didn't want to say anything. And Next thing that started was the growling. And when I'm talking growling, like there's no bears out there, okay? There's no wolves, all right? Maybe there's some coyotes, but they're not going to come up, and they're not going to be snapping twigs. You know, you need hands and you need thumbs to be able to snap twigs, right? So we knew that it was either somebody out there fucking with us, like a person, and we're having this conversation, and Paul and I, well, who the fuck would be out here, you know? And that's when this growling started. It was so loud and so different. It was like this low guttural growl. If you ever heard like a crocodile or an alligator make that noise, where it's like it has that low visceral bubble to its growl, like when I talked to my firefighter buddy, and he tried to describe the whooping and the other things, I'll do my best to give you an impression of what it sounded like, but it was in the range of like a right. That's the best I can do, and I'm not even doing a good job of it. But imagine hearing that like on a tone that is so low and so deep. Whatever was doing it was big. It had a lung capacity that was far above and beyond what a human being can make in that tone. I don't care what anybody says, okay? This, whatever this was, almost like if you've heard a didgeridoo, and the way that that thing has that wave to it or whatever. Anywho, this growling is it'll happen, you know, here. It'll happen from north. It'll happen, you know, to the east and the west and south, like northeast, southwest. And at the same time, you're hearing this, you know, you're hearing all the twig snapping. And when it first started, it was like, you know, it was here and there, you know, and then you could hear it like coming in and getting closer, and then they would come back out. But at the same time, you could hear them like moving all around us. And nobody said it out loud, but, you know, we either thought somebody was fucking with us, like a human being in that moment. It wasn't until years and years and years ago the years went on that I put two and two together and thought that it could have been a Bigfoot Sasquatch encounter, which I'm fairly certain it was now, knowing what I know about the Navajo Nation, and knowing that this is a point I wanted to get to as well, where I was literally, you know, was 45, 60 to 60 miles away from where the college students who were with their professor who had been given a grant by the Navajo Nation to study the Bigfoot family, like it wasn't far. Like, I mean, you know, for them, if they're traveling on foot, you could make it in less than half a day to this place. I mean, you know, and if you're into this subject, you know, people think, oh, Bigfoot, there's only one Bigfoot. No, but if you get into this subject, you realize that there's, I don't know what you would call them, tribes of them, or there is family units of them. There's more than one, you know, and most of the activity that you come across, you know, if there's one, there's usually another around. From what I've understood of a lot of these stories I've heard from Sasquatch Chronicles to the Facts by How to Hunt, you know, which to me are the two best podcasts or storytellers on this subject that you can find out there right now. The sheer creep factor and terrifying like experience that we were having while this was going on, like if on a scale of 1 to 10 of how scared we were, I mean, it was maxed out at a 15. Okay. The best thing I can tell you is when you're in the pitch black darkness and you're trying to dig out your car because you're stuck, and you are hearing footsteps, you know, and twigs snapping, right? North, south, east, west. And then the low guttural growling comes in, right? Like, and I'm not even doing it justice, you know? I mean, I'm doing my best to give you an impression of it, but that's not even close to how it was. And I'm not even giving a good impression of how viscerally terrifying this low guttural growl was. But whatever it was had us for the taking. If it wanted to hurt us, I mean, we were right there. They could have had us, you know. To me, it was more, we shouldn't have been out there at that time. We also were not where we should have been, where you're supposed to park the car and go for your hike and then walk back, get in your car and drive off. If this was the parking place and you go hiking this way, we had got back in our car when we were done with our initial hike, and we drove this way, went off the beaten path. And if they were watching us, so to say, they saw us doing donuts, being stupid kids, you know, myself being 17, 16, 17, 18 years old, in 2002, 2003, in that range, we might have pissed them off. You know, we might have been in their area and we were being extremely disrespectful. And like I say, they had us for the taking. We were sitting there. We were sitting ducks. I mean, imagine being in the pitch black darkness and hearing, you know, these growls and the twig snapping, and hearing the footsteps running all around us. It was like they were like moving in and moving out, but like circling us the whole time in unison, working together, right? Like a wolf pack's not going to do that. Bears, but neither of those are out there. But I'm just trying to give an example for those out there who think that this is a crazy story and that I'm just out of my mind. Also, how are you going to get, you know, 3 or 4 human beings who should not even be out in the middle? Like, you would have to have a flashlight if you were walking up, because we are so far out there. Like, there's no homes around. There's no like a community of residential housing or a trailer park. There's none of that. I mean, you are out in the boonies, you know. There's nothing remotely close to where we are. We are out there, you know. And none of us wanted to say it, but I think in the moment we thought it was out here. The skinwalker lore is big with the Navajo people. I think we thought maybe we were dealing with something like that in the moment, because it was that terrifying, it was that scary. But I will tell you, as this continued and we finally got the car dug out and opened up enough, the tires dug out and enough room to get the rubber mats underneath each tire, the left and right back tires. We were all so scared at this point. My dog Star is beyond terrified in the front seat, will not get out of the car. Brooke and Matt, who had been sitting in the car, got out of the car and are now outside with us, and they had been helping us dig to get this ready as fast as we could, because even sitting in the car with the music on and hanging out, they could hear the growling. They could hear what was going on. It was so, like, it's not like me growling. Like, this was so low and so loud. Something that was doing it was so big that you could overhear it over the car still being on, over the radio that we had playing as we were listening to music, trying to figure out how to get this done. Now, granted, the windows might have been rolled down and whatnot, so we could all talk to each other and this, that, and the other. But by this time, everybody's out of the car. You have 2 people on each side trying to help dig. And when we finally get to where we think we can get some traction and get the hell out of here, the uptick in growling, the uptick in the twig breaking, and the footsteps, everything is at a fever pitch, okay? If there was a moment in time where I've ever been scared, I've never been scared, and I don't think anybody that was involved in this little experience has ever been that terrified in their entire lives. I mean, because it was the unknown. It was something completely out of the ordinary, and caught us by surprise. We didn't expect to have this experience that night, okay? So we're going to push the car. And the first couple times, you've got Brooke who hops in the front seat, and you've got me and Paul, and we're trying to push. Well, we're not strong enough. And Matt, who's on a rolled ankle, remember he rolled his ankle coming off the hill earlier. He had been hurt. So at this point, You've got growling, twigs snapping, the footsteps. It's all at a fever pitch. And so Matt says he's hobbling on one good leg at this point. He can't even put pressure on his ankle. He's in so much pain. Well, he says he's going to help. Okay, Matt's now going to help because we need to push this car and get it out, and Paul and I can't do it on our own. So this next 10 seconds of when the three of us get behind the car and get ready to push, and Brooke gets in the front seat, we got the window down, and she's talking to us and says, okay, tell me when you're ready. And I respond, I'll never forget this, okay, in the final closing moments of this experience, I tell her, we're going to count to 3. And the entire time we're talking to each other, I can't describe to you the uptick in activity. It's getting closer. The growling that would start but then go away, start then go away, is now like happening the entire time. It's not going away anymore. It is like if there's like a pressure cooker moment where like the level is rising, the meter is rising, right? It's just, we're right here now, right? If this was the beginning and it started here, the growling, it's intensified. The growling, the twig breaking has intensified to peak level. Okay, so I yell out to Brooke from behind the car, on the count of 3, we're gonna count to 3, and you're gonna hit the gas, and we're gonna push. Okay, you've got Matt on a rolled ankle, terrified, scared out of his mind, so he's gonna help. You got me and Paul, who have been out there the whole time listening to this as we've been digging the tires out to try to figure out how we can get the hell out of here. Altogether, I'd say this is about a 2.5-3 hour experience from sunset to nighttime to where we are now. It's got to be about 10 o'clock, if anywhere between 10 and 11. Like it's 2.5 hour, 3 hours. It was a while. It felt like an eternity. Okay, so when I count the number 1, the way these twigs started breaking, I don't know how many of them there were, but the sound of this was intensifying in a way you wouldn't believe. The growling was picking up. The meter on the growling, the level of intensity was just, I can't describe to you it might sound crazy, but this is the best way that I can interpret it and describe it to you. Well, I count to 1, I count to 2, and as all this is that, like I said, a fever pitch of a moment. In between 2 and 3, in that half a second, split second, it sounded like a tree trunk split in half. And folks, there's no trees out there. Like, there's petrified trees and there's sagebrush and there's, I don't know what, it was the loudest crack. It was the first and only sound that sounded like that. But when I counted 1, 2, and then that split second between 2 and 3, whatever, I can't even begin to understand what they did or what, something sounded like the loudest crack, like a tree split in half or something. Anywho, we push, Brooke hits the gas, we're so fucking terrified. Brooke, we get out, the car finally gets some traction and gets out, and I can tell you, we started to lose the red lights, the brake, like the red lights from the back of the car, whatever they are, as she was driving. We started to lose those in the dark. Brooke was so scared that she was driving, and Matt on the rolled ankle, myself, Paul, we're running, chasing this car in the dark. She finally stops. We all 3 jump in the car. We leave the tire iron, we leave the mats, we left whatever else, whether it was the notebook or whatever else that we were using to help dig. We left it all. We didn't turn around to see what it was. We didn't want to know what it was. Okay? That's how scary this experience was. And this is the best way that I could describe it. I don't know how well it, because there was no visual of what we were seeing. But the more and more, and I'll give them a plug again, the more and more I've listened to the Facts by How to Hunt on YouTube or your Spotify account or wherever you listen to your podcast, Sasquatch Chronicles, there's been numerous stories that we have come across. Myself, my wife Megan, when we listen to these podcasts, when we go to bed at night, it's something I love to listen to as I'm laying down with my eyes closed and getting ready to go to sleep for that hour as I wind down. I have heard about the growling. I've heard about how they will mess with you if you're in their area, whether you're camping or if you're out for a hike. It doesn't happen to everybody. I'm not saying that this is so prevalent that, you're going to go out there and you're going to experience this. I've been out to the woods, I don't know how many times. I grew up out on the ranch. Like I said, I can only think back to one thing that was kind of strange. I don't know exactly what happened. But in all my years, this is the one experience I have that is like this. And there's never been anything else even close to it. And after doing the deep dive on this subject, something in my bones, something inside of me is just certain, after discovering all these beautiful and terrifying and wonderful stories from the Navajo reservation, I did not realize how prevalent this Bigfoot activity was in our neck of the woods. I knew it was heavy in the Pacific Northwest. I know about what's happened in Whitehall, New York, and in the Adirondacks on the East Coast in New York. I know about the Appalachian Mountain stories. I know about Missouri, Kentucky, Oklahoma Bigfoot stories. I mean, from the Michigan up into Canada and all across North America. Really, there are these fantastical stories. Another thing that I will share with you, if you know President Theodore Roosevelt, his book, The Wilderness Hunter, his hunting memoirs from, I would like to say, the late 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, somewhere in that range. There's a story in there of when he was on a hunt in Montana, in the Montana wilderness. I mean, think about this, guys. You go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's no such thing as Bigfoot, or there's no, there's no TV shows about it. There's no, we're talking straight wilderness here, okay? And he's up there to hunt moose, or he's up there to hunt bull elk, and he's with his hunting guide, an old timer is how he describes him, an old timer who knows the Montana wilderness and is taking him on this hike. And at this time, future President Theodore Roosevelt is in his 20s, I believe, and it's him, the hunting guide, and another buddy, and they're sitting down at the fire at night, and they hear this horrendous scream in the middle of the night while they're sitting by the campfire. And future President Theodore Roosevelt asks the hunting guide, "What the hell was that?" And he describes this in his memoirs, okay? The Wilderness Hunter. You can look this up. This is fact. This is not me making this shit up. And the old timer goes on to tell him, "That's a scream I hope to have never heard again in my life." And as Theodore Roosevelt asks for a little more information, this old timer hunting guide begins to tell him a story of 30 plus years previous, of when he was in his 20s or 30s, because this man is now in his 50s or 60s, let's say. And so we're going back, 1870s, 80s, or somewhere in there, right? Like, you're going back way far. And he goes on to describe this story about when him and his buddy were hunting, and they were younger men, and they were out there trapping beaver in the Montana wilderness, and they were being stalked by this creature that he knew was walking upright. They could never get a visual on it, but they could smell it. If you know anything about the Sasquatch stories or the Bigfoot encounters, sometimes it's accompanied by a horrendous smell, a rotten egg, rotting meat, death smell. Well, this man describes this while he's talking to future President Theodore Roosevelt, sitting around a campfire, telling him that him and his buddy, who were out there trapping beaver, were being stalked by this animal, so much so that it was messing with them night and day for this 2 to 3 day experience they had. and where they were so terrified at night where they could hear it walking around, growling, branches breaking. Sound familiar? Right? Okay. Only thing missing from my story is the smell, right? But you got the low guttural growling. You've got even screaming that's going on. And at nighttime, they're taking shots in the dark. They could hear this thing running around. What did I describe earlier? That we could hear the footsteps going all around us, right? Well, they were fairly certain that it was just one, right? That they knew it was one thing that was messing with them. And the way this story ends, it's not good. Okay, this story doesn't end well. So the old timer goes on to say that the next morning when they woke up after firing shots in the dark and having a terrifying experience that night of this thing messing with them, well, he sends his buddy to go get the rest of the traps from wherever they have them in the ponds or whatever they're trapping beaver and so whatnot. Well, pardon me, let me get this right. He goes off to get the traps. His buddy stays behind at camp and is going to gather everything up. So by the time he gets back, they can get on their horses and ride out and get the hell out of there. Well, to his beyond his worst nightmare of what could have ever happened, as he gets back to camp later that day, he finds the camp completely torn apart. But more importantly, and think about this, he finds his buddy, his hunting buddy, who has been pulled apart, ripped in half. Okay? Guts and entrails hanging out. The man is in pieces. Okay? Let me tell you something. A grizzly bear is going to fuck you up. And there are grizzly bears in the Montana mountains. Okay? Wolf packs are going to tear you apart. They're going to eat you. They're going to strip every bit of meat off your bones. They're not going to pull you apart. They're not going to rip you in half. Okay? Something dismembered this man with its bare hands. Something pulled this man apart. You can read this story in The Wilderness Hunter. I'll say it again, by Theodore Roosevelt, future President Theodore Roosevelt, his hunting memoirs. There is a chapter in there where he goes in to describe this encounter. Things like that I've come across. And what's even more amazing is you get into the Native American cultures from the West, Pacific Northwest to the Southwest here where I am, across the Midwest and into the East Coast. Excuse me. All of these First Nations people, and should I mention also into Canada, the First Nations people in Canada, they all have their own Sasquatch stories. Or the giants, the stories of the giants. Sasquatch literally means the hairy giant, okay? They're also known as the Busquas up in Alaska. They're known as the Oma in, I think it's another tribe here in North America. If I'm not mistaken, it's up in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. But all of these cultures, long before the colonial folks from Europe got here, they all have these stories. Let's even go back, before I wrap this up, Leif Erikson and the Vikings and his diaries. He has stories of him and his men being stalked by something that was walking upright, walking on 2 feet. They could hear the footsteps. They were being stalked, and it was accompanied by a horrendous smell. Where's that smell again, right? That smelled like death, smelled like rotting eggs. But it was something that always stayed in the shadows, in the trees. They never got a sight of it, but they could hear it. They could smell it. They could hear it scream, hear it growling. Sound familiar? Once again, I had that experience. Me and my friends had an experience like that. I didn't smell it. It didn't have a smell. Another thing, that I want to get in on this little thing before I wrap up. When Megan and I and the kids were in the La Plata Mountains, I would say no more than 3 years ago, we went out for a hike for the day. And if you're into this subject, into these stories, and you've done the dive and you know all about the trees being bent and broke and all that, we ourselves, Megan and I, have pictures of it. We came across a tree, a good size tree, little tree that was growing, that if Megan and I tried our best and we tried to push this thing over and break it and snap it, there's no way. This fucking tree was bent over and broken at the stalk, but it was pointing in a way as if it was like in a certain direction. And if you get into this subject, you'll find more and more stories where people who are out, you know, in the national forests or out for a hike or whatever they're doing, they'll find these trees like that. A lot of times they're bent at, 7, 8, 9 feet up, but sometimes they'll find trees ripped out of the ground and stuffed back in with the roots hanging out. I mean, you tell me what could do that, So what I want to do with this Tree Peakers podcast is just take people on a journey. If you have an open mind and you're willing to listen to these stories, it's all going to come from real people, real experiences of people that I've come across while I'm bartending or serving tables. And I've got them to open up with me. Not everybody's agreed to do an interview with me. There's a gentleman who has got an encounter out of Northern California that I hope to get on audio. He said he definitely wouldn't come on camera, but he's got an amazing story about being a logger up in Northern California. This is a Navajo Native American gentleman who I take care of usually every Sunday or whatever when they come into the restaurant. And him and his family actually call me Little Bigfoot. That's their nickname for me when they come in, because I always want to hear their Bigfoot stories, because him and his family have a few, but his in particular is pretty amazing. And the way that when he was done working that day and what he saw, and then the following day how it was in I think he told me the Humboldt County, it was on the front page of the Humboldt County newspaper, that he wasn't the only one to see it that day. There was more people. I've spoken to Brenda Harris, who's big in the Bigfoot community around here off the Navajo reservation. She has said that she would be interested in doing an interview with me. I've reached out to her. So I have got a lot of exciting things lined up for this. I didn't exactly know how to do this particular one. I hope this story was shared well. It's a little different because I'm on camera today. The first 3 episodes, there's no visuals, but I wanted to get out in front and let everybody know exactly who I am and why I'm doing this. And as I continue to go, you will hear me talking with a lot of people that necessarily aren't my friends that I see on a daily basis. They're just people that I've come across. So it's not like me and my buddies are making up these stories and I'm going to get, people on that I'm familiar with on a daily basis. It's not even anything close to that. So I'm going to do my best to bring you all fun and exciting episodes of the Tree Peakers podcast. Today was my story, and I don't have any others, so I'm not going to make anything up. You're not going to hear me talking about stuff that never happened. This is something that was real and that happened, and I hope I was able to articulate well and tell it in a way that was that kept you entertained and kept you engaged this whole time. So once again, I am Eddie. I am the host of the Tree Peakers podcast that began now in 2023. This took just about an hour, and thanks for listening. And I am very excited for the future and for the exciting, amazing, some terrifying, some jaw-dropping, amazing stories that are to come. And I've got one from my hotshot firefighter buddy that's coming up that we'll explore his first 2 stories from the Gila National Forest here in New Mexico and from Boise, Idaho once again, and try to catch a couple things that maybe we missed on the first 2 occasions that we spoke. But he's got a 3rd story that is a little bit out of the ordinary, but it's still involved with high strangeness and being out in the wilderness while he's fighting fires, and I'm excited for you all to hear that as well. So once again, this has been episode 4 of the Tree Peakers podcast. We got a lot to look forward to. I'm Eddie, and I thank you for your time, and I will see you all in the future. Cheers.